I want to bring you up to speed right now on a brand new trial that is starting this week out of Montgomery County, Ohio. And we could have opening statements as soon as Tuesday for the trial of defendant Matheau Moore. Moore is charged with 2 counts of felony murder and 1 count of felonious assault in the death of his wife, Emily Noble. Now, the victim was reported missing in May of 2020, and the defendant actually went on a podcast to talk about his wife's last known whereabouts, claiming that she vanished overnight after the couple went to bed in 2 separate rooms, and this all followed a night out for Noble celebrating her 52nd birthday. But fast forward 4 months later, and Noble's remains would be found hanging from a tree with a USB cord wrapped around her neck. And investigators believe that Moore staged Noble's death as a suicide. So with jury selection beginning tomorrow, we hope to see those opening statements that same day, and we're going to keep you updated on the latest when it comes in. And let's just talk a little bit about this trial. So Joe, give you a little bit of procedural issues that are happening here. Apparently, the state is accusing the defense of literally turning over in the last minute an expert report that indicates you can't rule out suicide. And they claim the defense had this report for, I think, 300 days, chose to give it to the state at the last minute, and that doesn't give the state enough time to prepare. The state had been very angry at this. They filed opposing motions that were denied by the trial court. They took it up to a higher court. The appellate court denied it. First, talk to me about the issue of, fair play in a case, right? What's allowed, what is not allowed, because to have an expert opinion about whether or not this is suicide, I think that's a central question. Maybe the defense didn't do the right thing here.
Yeah, for sure. If that's actually the case, I mean, when you are trying to do a conviction, a criminal trial, someone needs to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Based on admissible evidence. So, that's why hearsay without an exception doesn't come in, because it's inherently trustworthy. Also, there's a discovery process, and from that discovery process, each side is supposed to show each other what they have, particularly the things that they would use that potentially bear on the issue at hand, the facts of the case, what actually happened, particularly in a case like this where it is a direct question as to whether or not this person killed themselves or whether they were actually killed. And there's a question as to whether he actually staged this murder. Clearly, if they have had paperwork for over a year that they plan to make a presentation on, an expert presentation on, saying that this could be suicide, then the other side needs to be able to prepare on that. They need to be able to cross on that. They might have an opposing witness on it or whatever else. And so therefore, it's prejudicial that that would be allowed to be used when it wasn't shown at the time that it could have been.
Yeah, and the state had filed this motion to continue the trial and said that if they were given more time to prepare a rebuttal witness to the defense's witness, Dr. Heather Gavin, they said, quote, the state is only in this position due to the timing of the defense disclosures. Had the report been disclosed earlier, these issues would have already been litigated. So let's just get to the context of this, okay? How do you prove something was staged? How do you prove a crime was actually, you made it look like a suicide when it wasn't? I've seen it in movies. I don't know how you argue it, or the prosecutors are going to argue that at a trial.
My understanding is that from this case, from the evidence of her death in terms of how she was found and the status of and the condition of her body, it actually suggested a trauma that was not self-inflicted. And so basically, for lack of a better term, the remains actually did the talking. And so with that, it would seem as if that perhaps this was staged because the suggestion from the evidence was that she actually died in a way that was not in her own hands. And so that's kind of how this has proceeded. It was presented like it was actually, a suicide or whatever else. But there's evidence that perhaps based on how she actually was found, her condition, et cetera, that she was actually killed. And so therefore, the prosecution is going to rely on that and go down the road, and that's why they are prosecuting him.
Joe, I'll give you about 30 seconds. We know that Mr. Moore has been pleading his innocence, but he actually went on that podcast, reached out to them, and they said he said some really weird things like, describe, your wife. He goes, I never saw her get on the scale. She's very small, like 100 pounds, pretty legs, great arms. And they're like, this is weird. We have about 30 seconds.
Less than sensitive. right? He doesn't seem to be all there when you say things that are less than sensitive. You're not exactly coming off like a grieving husband. And to the extent that those things may be admissible, those things may tip a jury in a certain direction
Right.
if he's not coming off the right way.
Yeah, it's an interesting case and one that I'm glad we're going to have an opportunity to cover here on Law and Crime.